Welcome to another episode of our video series of the critique of modern systems.
It's a real pleasure to be here. How have you been?
I'm doing great, thank you. And I'm ready to get into a topic that, well, it sounds a bit dry on the surface, but it's so fundamental to, well, everything.
Right.
We're talking about the science of decision making.
And it really is a core strategic concept. It doesn't matter if you're, running a huge company or just trying to map out your own life. It's a discipline we think we practice, but very few people actually study it.
That's the key thing, isn't it? The neglect. We're in this era that just demands sharper, faster choices.
And the consequences feel so much bigger now.
Exactly. But at the same time, we see this pattern, especially in cultures just saturated with information, of avoiding decisions altogether.
Well, it's the path of least resistance.
Yeah.
It's easier to let the world decide for you.
Let your boss or your family or the news cycle make the choice.
Yes. And then you get a lifetime license to complain about how it turned out.
Which is a really destructive place to be. If you don't consciously label what a decision is, it just gets lost in the flow of life. You lose your agency.
You do. And
Yeah.
if you want to think strategically about anything, you have to start with a real assessment of the choice itself. We often tell people to do a kind of a rapid SWOT analysis on their life.
Okay, let's make that practical for someone listening. A SWOT analysis of life. What does that actually look like in the moment?
It means you pause. Before you act, you just stop and identify the situation. Time, place, what resources you have.
Yeah.
Then you map the 4 vectors for that choice.
Okay.
So say you're offered a new job. High stress, high pay. Your strength might be your unique technical skill. The weakness, maybe you don't know the corporate culture there.
Right.
The opportunity is the huge salary jump. And the threat, burnout. Or the toll it takes on your family.
So the goal isn't just to make a list, it's to force yourself to consciously map the territory, to make it a, well, deliberate activity.
That's it. You're forcing it into what we'll call System 2. And when you understand the sheer weight of that action, that commitment, it makes sense why we avoid it. The language itself tells us a lot.
This is where it gets really interesting, I think. The etymology, the deep meaning behind the word decision.
When you trace the root, it comes from a word meaning firmness or to be fixed. But the layers beneath that are what's so powerful. It means stability, patience, stopping,
Stopping.
but also cutting off, making something firm, remaining stationary.
Oh, that is just huge. So a decision is basically an act of amputation.
In a way, yes.
You're literally cutting away all the other possibilities to create stability. No wonder we're so anxious about it. We're terrified of cutting off our options.
And that terror, that fear, is why decision science was kind of locked away for decades. It was just for business schools,
Right, for CEOs and generals, people moving resources around.
Exactly. But then the whole field was turned on its head in 2002. Suddenly, it wasn't just for the boardroom.
Because a psychologist won the Nobel Prize in economics.
Right. For work that basically proved the foundational model of classical economics was wrong.
The idea of homo economicus.
The perfectly rational person who always calculates what's best for them. The work showed that person just, doesn't exist. It pulled decision science into neuroscience, into evolutionary biology.
Okay, let's unpack that. The single revolutionary idea here is that humans are not rational beings.
We can think rationally. We're capable of it. But we rarely decide rationally. We are, at our core, emotion machines.
Governed by these deep biological
Drives we inherited. Fear of loss, need for belonging. These are much more powerful than a logical spreadsheet. The final push, that gut feeling, is an emotional signal.
And that insight is what gives us the main framework everyone uses today, the 2 systems.
Precisely. We talk about System 1 and System 2. It's a much more useful model than the old left brain, right brain thing. It's about how the brain manages its energy.
Okay, so system 1, that's the intuitive brain, the effortless one.
Right. Low cognition, low effort. But it has this enormous capacity and speed. It's handling almost everything you do all day.
You have something like 70,000 thoughts a day. If you had to consciously process each one, your brain would just shut down.
It would. And that's the optimization principle. Your brain is maybe 2% of your body mass, but it uses 20% of your energy.
Wow, 20%.
Sometimes up to 25%. So to save energy, it automates everything it can. That's System 1.
So, like, driving a car. The first time you do it, it's overwhelming.
Painfully so. That's all System 2.
But after 20 years, you can drive through traffic, listen to the radio, drink a coffee, and not consciously remember any of it.
Exactly. Thousands of micro decisions, all automated, because they're low stakes. Choosing a chocolate bar at the checkout isn't going to change your life.
Whereas system 2, that's the deliberate conscious engine.
That's the heavy machinery, high cognition, high effort, and it's much slower.
This is what you activate when the choice really matters.
When it's highly valued, needs a justification, and the outcome has major consequences. We're talking about marriage, changing careers, buying a house.
A car is a good example.
A classic System 2 decision. You're weighing prestige, fuel efficiency, resale value, service costs.
Yeah.
It takes rational effort over days or weeks.
But the really fascinating part is that there's a decision that comes before that.
Yes.
The decision about how to decide which system do you even use for this problem.
And that's the weak point. We think we're consciously handing problems over to System 2, but often System 1, the automation, makes that choice for us. And that vulnerability is what gets exploited.
So that's the hidden premise here. If our brain just defaults to what's easy, then external forces can, well, they can hack the system. They can and they do all the time.
To influence what we buy, how we vote, even our relationships.
This is basically nudge theory. If companies or political groups can frame a big, complex choice to look like a simple, low-effort one, they can bypass your rational brain entirely.
Can you give me an everyday example of that kind of hack? The easiest one to see is the default bias.
Okay.
System 1 loves a default option because it means no effort.
Right.
So if a company automatically enrolls you in a retirement plan or pre-checks the box for marketing emails,
Almost nobody changes it.
almost nobody. Even if a 5-minute System 2 analysis would show it's not the best option for you. They've made the decision for you by making it effortless.
Which brings this all to a pretty huge philosophical question, doesn't it? If we're this easy to nudge around, is free will just an illusion?
The research points to a very challenging answer. It suggests that you are free to choose what you want,
Okay.
but you're not free to choose what you want.
The menu of options is given to you. The system dictates the menu.
Precisely. The larger culture shapes your identity. It sets the rules for what it means to be a modern professional or a good parent or a part of a certain social class. And those roles define everything.
The clothes you wear, the car you drive, the brands you're supposed to like.
Even the technology you have to use. The system can dictate that to be a relevant professional today, you must engage with this platform or that digital tool.
So we're presented with this illusion of infinite choice.
But the options are curated. They're constructed by our culture, our family, the media. And we believe the selections we make from that menu are our own pure, free choices. That's the big misunderstanding.
I mean, even your most basic identity markers, your nationality, your culture, your religion, those are almost always assigned at birth.
Yes.
And choosing to go against that grain, to hold a minority belief or identity, requires this immense constant effort to fight the structure.
That's a great way to put it. The system puts a lifelong high-effort tax on that choice. Deciding to change careers at 50 is one thing, but living with the friction of that choice every day requires constant System 2 energy. You're fighting the default.
So when someone listening is trying to navigate this, what's the takeaway?
The first step is just recognition. Recognizing that your choices, from what you buy at the grocery store to your career path, are far more controlled by these external frames than you'd like to admit.
It's about understanding the two systems in yourself.
And seeing the external pressures for what they are, the defaults, the framing, the social anchors, that's the only way to reclaim any real autonomy. You have to stop letting System 1 handle every important challenge just because it's easy.
We have thousands, maybe millions of decisions to make. So the most critical skill is developing what you could call decision awareness.
Yes. That pause, the ability to stop and ask, is this a chocolate bar decision? Or is this a life trajectory decision that demands my full conscious attention?
That pause is the moment of agency.
And that really leaves a critical question for you to think about. If even your most fundamental choices about who you are and what you believe are so heavily shaped by the system you were born into, how much of the life you're living right now is truly a product of your own selection, and how much is just you following the path of least resistance?